Hi, this is Ron Pittman, the Loan Doctor, and I'm here with your tip of the week. Now, this tip is a great tip because it can literally save yours or a loved one's life. When I was growing up in California, we had earthquake drills, and what they taught us to do was to crawl under the desk because then we wouldn't hit by falling debris. But what I'm finding out is that that's the last thing you can do. And what I started doing is because all of this earthquakes in Haiti and some of these other natural disasters, started doing some little research, and what I found out from this man named Doug Kopp, who has experience in crawling in hundreds and hundreds of collapsed buildings, has been involved in most of the natural disasters that happened around the world since 1985. He's been in hundreds of these things, and he's found out that there's something that he calls a triangle of life. Now I'm going to get into that here. So I'm just going to read some of this to you because otherwise I'm going to kind of screw this up. So number one, his first tip, there's 10 tips. The first tip is, number one, most everyone who simply ducks and covers when buildings collapse are crushed to death. People who get under objects like desks or cars are crushed. So right off the bat, what I learned in grade school is totally wrong. So don't crawl under a desk, don't crawl under a sofa, don't crawl under things because the weight of the building crushes those. Number two, cats and dogs and babies often naturally curl up in the fetal position. You should too in an earthquake. It's a natural survival instinct. So what he says is curl up in the fetal position, and instead of crawling under a desk or a sofa or furniture, curl up next to them, because when the weight of the building, when the roofs collapse, it creates a void next to the furniture, and that's where you're going to survive. So number three is wooden buildings are the safest type of construction to be in during an earthquake. He says because wood is flexible and it moves. Bricks will break into individual bricks, and though they'll cause damage to you, they're a lot safer than concrete slabs, because concrete slabs, they're not going to break up. They're just too heavy and they just crush. He says they squash bodies. So number four, if you're in bed during the night and an earthquake happens, simply roll off the bed and curl up next to the bed. Now, he says hotels would have a much higher survival rate if they would just post signs that said, during an earthquake, roll off the bed and curl up next to it. So, and that's where the void will be created. So, number five, in an earthquake, if you cannot easily escape out the door or the window, then lie down and curl up in the fetal position next to a sofa or a large chair. Again, curl up next to some type of furniture. Now he says what I always thought was you're supposed to stand in the doorway. This is number six. He says most everyone who gets under a doorway when buildings collapse is killed. He says the reason why is because when you stand under a doorway and a door jam falls forward or backward, you will be crushed by the ceiling above. If the door jams sideways, then you're going to be cut in half. He said, so don't get in the doorways. And that's always something that I always thought too, was you're supposed to get in the doorway. Obviously, don't do that. Number seven, never go to the stairs. He says the stairs have a different momentum of frequency, which means they swing separately than the main part of the building. So he says what happens is that when people get on those stairs and they start swinging differently and they start breaking up. And he says, and I'm not going to get into the details, but they get chopped up. It's not a good place to be. Don't go to the stairs. Number eight, get near the outer walls of a building or outside them if possible. It's much better to be near the outside of a building rather than the interior. The farther away you get from the outside of a building to the interior, the harder it is to get out. So the further inside a building you are, the harder it is to get out. So try to get close to the outside if you can. Number nine, people inside of their vehicles are crushed when the road above them falls in an earthquake and crushes their vehicles. Now that's exactly what happened. If you remember, I remember that earthquake in San Francisco where the two freeways were on top of each other and some of them came down and crushed all those cars. He says that's exactly what happened in San Francisco. Now there were voids next to the cars, so he says, you know, if an earthquake happens, stop your car, get out, get next to the car. So, and the last one, number 10, is he said, while crawling inside of collapsed newspaper offices and other offices with lots of paper, that paper does not compact. So large voids were found surrounding stacks of paper. So if you're in an office building and you have some stacks of paper around, that's where you need to be. So he said this is a great tip to help save your life or save somebody else's. Remember these things when if you ever happen to be in an earthquake. You know, luckily in where I live, we don't get lots of them. But you know, when you're traveling around, that may be something that you may want to remember. So hopefully this you never have to use this. But if you do, remember, don't crawl under things. Curl up in a fetal position. Get next to something like a sofa. Don't crawl under it. So pass that word around. You might want to rewind this a couple times and listen through this so that you can get all the details. Now this tip can literally save your life or your loved one's life. Now Sandy and I have a whole bunch of tips that can save your financial life, especially when it comes to mortgages. Now we know how to buy a house with no money down. In fact, we know 5 or 6 different ways to do that. We can help you. We know some strategies where the seller can help pay your payments for a couple of years. We can show you how you can buy a larger house for the smaller house's payment. We can show you how it can save you money to refinance your home. Or if it doesn't, if it's not going to save you money, we'll tell you that too. Look, we have a lot of different strategies that can help you out. Call us. We'll help you out. Our phone number is right here. Give us a call. We'll talk to you next week on the Tip of the Week.